Every day, people sit at family dinners, workplaces, and yes, church pews, thinking really dark thoughts. They don't, this life's not worth living. They don't want to be here anymore. Today, we break the silence. Our guest is Paula Sammons. Paula is a Christian therapist and the founder of Alabaster Counseling in Bristol, Tennessee. Paula, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here.
Well, grateful to have you. I want to start. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what the mission of Alabaster Counseling is?
Sure, yeah. So a little bit about me. I live in Bristol, Tennessee with my husband and four boys and our three kitties. I have my master's in marriage and family therapy from Liberty University. I received that in 2021. I practiced for a larger Christian counseling firm until spring of 23, and that was when the Lord opened doors for me to be able to open Alabaster. And so Alabaster is actually, the name is inspired by Second Corinthians. There's a passage that says we have these treasures in jars of clay to know this all surpassing power is from God and not from us. And so the idea of Alabaster is that it's a vessel for God to use, and the only thing that makes it worth anything is the fact that God's in it. I absolutely use my clinical degree and my clinical knowledge, but more than anything, I listen to what the Lord would have for me, and I'm obedient to Him, try to be obedient to Him in that. So that in large is Alabaster's mission. And something I'm really passionate about is bridging clinical health with spiritual health, because the Bible tells us who God is and who we are and who we're supposed to be. And therapy is made up of psychology and philosophy, which tells us who we are and who we're supposed to be. And if you mash those together at their base, they pair so beautifully. And that is my mission as a Christian clinical therapist, to kind of bridge those two worlds together.
That's wonderful. Now, to segue into our main topic, suicide prevention, you'd mentioned in your email that you recently attended a conference on that topic. Could you unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah, so it was an event called Mosh Out of Darkness that my friend Sean puts on every year. He's in a really cool band, and he hosts this event at Open Court in Knoxville, and it's all about suicide prevention. So I was able to have a table there with resources and handouts, and then I got to speak a little bit on suicide prevention at the event, and it was really meaningful to be there. It's a very heavy topic, of
Of course.
course, to cover, but I'm always grateful when I get to be a resource for people. It means a lot to me.
Sure. Yeah. And what are some of the common myths about suicide that may prevent people from seeking help when they need it?
This is probably one of the most common ones that I've seen, is a lot of times when somebody has a friend or family member that's very depressed and suddenly they seem okay, people think they're out of the woods. And a lot of times at that time is when the person's actually made the decision to
Mhm.
attempt suicide. So that's why they're seeming at peace, because they've come to a conclusion. And so that's where that's coming from.
So, what are some of the warning signs that people should watch for?
So that's one of them. If you have somebody that's chronically depressed or anxious and all of a sudden they seem perked up and at peace, but they're not necessarily elaborating on where that peace is coming from, that's when you start asking questions. Another thing is if they're giving away personal belongings, that seems odd that they're giving away. If they are somebody who's normally out and about and they're retrieving to being at home, they're sedentary, they're not answering the phone. If they've been through a major grief, if they've been diagnosed with a terminal illness, those are all warning signs that could indicate somebody may be pondering suicide.
Yeah, that's very insightful. I'd heard the part about the tendency to want to give things away, but you're
Mhm.
also saying that if a person suddenly seems to be better, that in itself is a warning sign.
It can be, yeah. If somebody's chronically depressed, sometimes they'll suddenly say, there's been Facebook posts of people that have been found after suicide completions or attempts, where they'll make a post that says, like, feel better than I have in a really long time.
Um,
And a post like that may be made right before the attempt.
I'm glad you shared that. That's I had never heard that before.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's maybe not the most common, but it does happen. And it's very sad, because in those situations where family and friends may have a closer watch on the person until they seem okay, it kind of, they might turn their back a little bit, thinking that the person can have the freedom to have more space. And that's unfortunately sometimes when it happens.
Sure. What are some of the spiritual and emotional factors that may go unnoticed when people are in that situation?
Yeah, I think it really depends. I mean, so in with mental health in general, women are more likely to mask things than men are. So with men, we're going to look at more shutting down and retrieving, whereas women, we may not always notice the change in their spiritual demeanor or their emotional. A lot of times they mask, so they may still show up to work, they may still function, they may still put a smile on their face. That's not true of all women, but in general, women are more likely to mask than men are. With men, you're going to see more of the retreating to be by themselves. You want to look for things in general, like if they're no longer active in church, if we're talking about spiritual things, if they seem very depressed, if they've quit their job, if they've stopped spending time with friends and family, if they're not leaving their house, those are all warning signs to look for.
Now, excuse me, how can Christian people in particular think about suicide without falling into any kind of shame or fear or overly simplistic answers? Well, you see that a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, so do you mean somebody who's struggling with it?
Sure.
Yeah. I think, you need to validate the struggle because our feelings are real. Like our feelings lie to us sometimes. They don't always tell us the truth.
Mhm.
If your feelings are telling you that you need to end your life, that's a lie from the enemy. However, it's a very heavy feeling to feel. So I wouldn't say like suppress it, ignore it. I would say work through it, identify where is this coming from and why do you feel this way? And I think it's really important for us to remember that our lives are not our own. They belong to the Lord, and He wills when our last breath should be taken. We don't have that. We should not have um, that ability to make that choice, and we take it into our own hands sometimes, unfortunately.
Mhm.
There's no shame in having a feeling. We can't help how we feel about things, but we can help how we react to them. One of my favorite quotes from C.S. Lewis, he says, "You can't help if a bird flies over your head, but you can help whether or not you build a nest for him to stay." And
Yes.
that's what I think of when I think of dark thoughts, is what are we choosing to do with them? It's like those flaming arrows from the enemy. And the best thing to do is not just to push a lie out, but to replace it with truth. And Philippians 4, think it's verses 7 through 11 covers that, where it gives all these attributes. First, it says to give our anxieties to the Lord with thanksgiving, but then it goes on to say anything good, anything noble, anything worthy of praise. And there's several other attributes. I can't remember them all. Dwell on such things. So the idea is when you're taking out the negative thought, you're giving it to God with a gratitude and an understanding that He can handle it. He can walk through this with you. You're not alone. He's always with you. He loves you. He has put it just immeasurable value on your life. But so you're giving that fear to him with thanksgiving, knowing he's able to deal with it, but then also replacing the thoughts with truth. If we just
Yes.
push them out, they're more likely to come back more aggressively.
Mhm. So, at what point do we need to maybe move from um, sharing with a close friend or possibly a pastor or spiritual advisor to getting actual clinical help?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and I think we all work really well together in this realm. Like I think it's really great the clients that I have that are also working with their pastors and their local body of believers. I see, sometimes bigger changes because they have the support outside of therapy as well, which is awesome. But I
Mhm.
think, it's the same as when we're looking at any kind of a physical ailment, kind of thinking if somebody was physically ill, would we send them to a doctor or would we allow the church to continue to treat them at a spiritual level? And I think God uses all of it. So I think whenever it comes to a place where the person's quality of life is shifting, is lessening, it's time to get clinical help, especially if it's emergent. If somebody's actively considering suicide, that's when you call mobile crisis in Knoxville. Other places, it would be the suicide hotline, which you can actually text now, which is great. 911 even, but that's when you get emergency contacts in place if somebody is at risk of harming themselves. If it's a nagging thought, if it's a nagging ideation, that's when it's time to start therapy.
Sure. And again, how are some of the ways, if you're not necessarily trained in that area, where you might be able to pinpoint when it is time for emergency intervention?
Yeah, I think that's hard to, if you're not trained in it, it's difficult. And so, being aware of the warning signs is great, to be on the lookout for those. But I would say when in doubt, go the clinical route. Like if you're not sure,
Of
it's
course.
better to overtreat than to undertreat in that regard. But yeah, again, I mean, it's going to be like a change in their demeanor is really what you're looking for. So if your friend suddenly is not acting like themselves, if they're giving their possessions away, if they've stopped going to church, if they are calling into work all the time, they're not showing up to functions they normally would be showing up to. That's when you start asking questions, and asking questions out of a place of care and not out of accusation makes a really big difference and will better help pinpoint where exactly they're at. So saying something like, "Hey, I noticed, you're always at Tuesday night Bible studies. You've missed the last three. Is everything okay? Can you help me better understand what's going on? How can I best support you?" Asking inviting questions will sometimes allow them to open up to you so that they and you together can make a determination as to what's going to be the best plan of care for them.
Okay. Now, what are some of the ways that churches and ministry leaders may unintentionally do more harm than good when they're trying to help people?
Yeah, so I totally believe that the Lord can supernaturally heal us, and I think sometimes He chooses to do that. Like sometimes a prayer can absolutely heal somebody, but sometimes it's not how the Lord would have us be healed, and I think it's trusting that. I've had situations with clients where they thought they were struggling with mental health because the pastor told them that they had some secret sin in their life, and they were really
Mhm,
perplexed, and they were like, I really don't, like I don't know what's going on. Um, and there's also situations where people have been told they're not praying hard enough.
mhm.
And I think, that's really damaging. It's damaging to do that for physical health or mental health. Now, are there situations where sin in our life can exacerbate our mental health issues and make them worse? Yes, absolutely. Are there situations where we can pray and the Lord will heal us? Yes, of course. But that is not always the pathway for healing. And so I think it's narrow-minded to say that that is the only way. It's putting God in a box to say that that
Mhm.
is the only way God would choose to heal somebody.
So, what does a suicide safe culture in the church setting look like?
I think it's an open-mindedness, and I think it's creating an environment where if somebody is struggling, they feel safe enough to go to their pastoral team without feeling shame of doing so. Because I think sometimes there's a fear because of like, we just mentioned, if you're going to be told, well, you must be doing something wrong, there must be a sin in your life, or you must not be praying hard enough, you're going to hesitate to share those difficult things with your pastoral team or with elders in the church or church leadership or just people you're close to. So I think it's an environment where people feel safe. And I think we're made to feel safe by um, being supportive of one another, asking questions that show that we really care. And again, I think that comes down to less judgment and more trying to understand.
Of
So
course.
when we go in without assumptions, we're more likely to understand somebody's heart and hear them. If we've already decided in our mind or in our hearts that somebody's struggling in a certain way because of some external factor, we're not going to be able to really hear what they have to say. So taking away any preconceived notions and being a safe space to people, validating emotions while still implementing truth. And I think that is a fine balance sometimes because the truth is the truth regardless of how you feel, but your feelings still impact you and they're still indicators that something within you needs to be addressed. So finding that balance of validating the emotions while still holding people to a standard of truth.
Of course. And let's talk about that a bit more. How can we preach hope without minimizing the pain and discourage people who may need help beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at Jesus's ministry is such a good template for that because he did such a good job of validating the physical ailments people had, the losses they experienced, while also preaching the gospel and calling them to truth and telling them when it was time to walk away from sin. And, he was relational. And I really think that's what a lot of it comes down to is loving people enough to get to know them before we say the hard things to them, and then loving them well enough to say the hard things in a careful way. I think that's really what it's about.
This is a sensitive thing to a sensitive question, and I'm sure the answer will be maybe difficult. But when a person has or is recovering from a suicidal ideation, what does that recovery look
I think it's different for everybody, a lot of times what try to map out for my clients when either they've struggled with an attempt or have just nagging thoughts that they're kind of trying to break the cycle of is we'll kind of plan out things to look forward to in the future. We'll identify a support system outside of therapy for them to lean into, make sure they have some kind of a regular routine. That's a really important thing. It doesn't have to be super extensive, but even if it's that you make your bed every day and you go for a 20-minute walk and you read God's word for 10 minutes, like that's a good routine to start with. Future events to look forward to, book a vacation, buy concert tickets, have something at least 3 months in advance that you're looking forward to. And most importantly, it's remembering where our value comes from. And the more that we learn who we are is by learning who God is and how we are made in his image. And so the best way to heal from, for believers, the best way to heal from a suicidal thought spell or an attempt is to really believe the truths of who he says you are and who you're called to be and who he says he is, and believing that he really does love you and place value on your life. That's probably the biggest element.
That's powerful. What gives you the most hope when working with people who feel overwhelmed and trapped?
I mean, very simply, it's Jesus. I mean, he gives me the most hope because I know how he views them. And I very much believe that he will give me the words and abilities to show them the way in which he loves them. And so I just put a great deal of trust in him. And he's never let me down. There's been times where people have said something and I get kind of stumped and I'm like, oh, what am I going to say? And he'll just kind of give me the words. And there's been times where I have something I'm going to say that I think sounds really profound. And he'll kind of stop me in my tracks and he'll be like, say this. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And I'll say it and it totally lands. And it's like the best thing I've said in the whole session. So it's just really trusting him. Like he is where our hope is. He is where our value is. And there is no hopelessness in him.
Absolutely not. Well, we're going to spend our last few minutes talking directly to anyone who may be watching this.
Sure.
And one of the obvious questions, what would you say directly to someone watching right now who may be thinking about ending their life?
Yeah. Wow. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that you feel that way. I don't know what life experiences you may have had that have led you up to this point. Regardless of what's gotten you here, I'm so sorry that you're here. I want you to know that your life matters so much and you can't be replaced, and you are uniquely designed and created, and your life has so much value. There is hope out there. If you are a part of a local church body, reach out to them, contact the suicide prevention hotline. You can text them if you don't want to call them, and it comes up very easily. You just Google it and it comes right up, and the number's highlighted, and you can click on it. If you have a mobile crisis in your area, you can call them. And the really cool thing that they do is in Knoxville, at least in Knox County, they will assess you over the phone and then make a determination if somebody needs to come out or not. So it doesn't necessarily mean somebody's coming to your house. You still have that kind of mitigated step of talking through things first. But, I would just tell you that your life means more than you can ever imagine, and you are uniquely created and designed with a purpose. And so I hope that you put the value on yourself to take the time to reach out, call a friend, call a family member, anybody who's a safe person. There is hope on the other side of this. People do overcome this, people do work through this. There's nothing you could do to make your life less valuable. There's nothing anybody else can do to make your life less valuable. And so I hope that you find the help and resources you need. Know that you're not alone. And there are many, many resources out there that would love to help you overcome this terrible hardship.
And closely related, what would you say to a family member or friend of someone who's worried about the person they love?
Yeah, it's really tough sometimes to be the family member or the friend because you can't control the other person. If you think that they are in immediate danger of harming themselves or others, always call 911. When in doubt, call 911. Otherwise, you can be a safe space, you can encourage, you can give opportunity for them to speak, you can check in on them regularly. It's difficult. People's decisions are their own, and we can influence, but we can't control. And that's very challenging. But we do have the ability to give a positive influence. And I would say to the believers out there listening, don't stop praying. Just don't stop praying for your loved ones that you're concerned about. Whatever the concern may be, don't stop praying for them.
So, what resources should churches and families have so they can be ready before we get to this point?
Yeah, I think having good relationships with local therapists is always a great thing, and doctors too, because sometimes med management is a helpful element of this as well. But with intensive outpatient, with inpatient facilities, having resources on hand, I think is great. A pastoral care team is super helpful as well. But when you're dealing with something that is life-threatening, you definitely want to get clinical stuff involved. And so I would say having resources ready to go that the church can say that they trust these facilities or these practitioners, it goes a long way. I think a personal recommendation goes a lot further than a Google search, which is typically how people are finding therapists.
Mhm.
So, if you trust your pastor and your pastor refers you to a therapist, there's a better feeling, greater feeling of safety going into that. So I would encourage local church leaderships to get to know the therapists in their area and form networking relationships with them.
Good call. Well, as we last question, but this will sum up everything else. Rubber meets the road. How can viewers take the next step toward getting help themselves or helping someone else get it if need be?
Yeah, I think it depends on what level of severity you're at. If you're dealing with ideations, get set up with a therapist. I mean, that's the best, I think, first step is getting set up with mental health help. Um, and start getting in God's word, start journaling perhaps, start planning future events. Um, I would say if it's more emergent, reach out to the suicide prevention hotline, and they will absolutely help you immediately. There's no wait time with that with the therapist. Sometimes it's a couple weeks even to get in. So, if you need something more emergent, go that route. There's also places that have you can check yourself in overnight. A lot of mental health hospitals and every county does that differently, but those are available as well. I'd say for family members and friends, just encourage them, remind them that they're valuable. But believe in people's we can't believe in people's value all by ourselves. They have to believe in it for themselves. So encouraging them to find that belief within themselves and within God is the most powerful thing we can do.
Absolutely. And I will be including some of the resources you mentioned in the description of the video too. If anyone needs to
Great.
access those, they will be available.
Awesome.
Well, Paula, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for being the hands and feet of Jesus in a very real way to people who are in very desperate need. It's been wonderful to have you to share your insights.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to do what I do, and I'm humbled that I get to do it. It's a great gift, and I really enjoyed our interview and chatting together.
And would you like to give your contact information so if anyone happens to live in your area, they could reach you if they need to?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm licensed in the state of Tennessee, temporarily licensed. So anybody in the state of Tennessee can see me. The best way to reach me is either text or call, and my number is 865-603-5383. The name of my practice is Alabaster Counseling Services. I am fully virtual, which is makes me sometimes more accessible. Some people don't prefer that. But if you wanted to reach out to me for referrals to in-person therapists in your area, I would be happy to do that too. My hope is always to get people with the best fit, and sometimes I'm not the best fit, so I want to get people to the right help. So even if I don't sound like I'm the right fit for you, reach out to me and I'll help you find somebody who is the right fit for you.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Paul, and God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye.